All right, I guess we'll get started here. First off, thanks so much for coming to this afternoon session. I know you've been pounded with presentations and meetings, and I certainly really appreciate you spending time here, talk a little bit about DevOps and sort of the emerging marketplace and your role in transformation. So my name is Stephen Elliott. I'm a Vice President at IDC. How many folks have heard of IDC? Perfect, that's what I expected. Have you heard of Gartner? Yes. So we are number 2 in that space to Gartner. And so I spend 90% of my time going around advising IT organizations, executives and their teams on DevOps and some of these related areas that we'll talk about today. And so one of the things that's really exciting here is you've got a tremendous opportunity. And how many of you are from the operations or app support side? How many from the development side? Great. So I think one of the things that's going on in the marketplace is this great opportunity to go and sort of have a sense of urgency with your developers. Go and really say, look, we've got this great information. We've got this great product. We've got information. We can help make your life a lot easier. And I think one of the things that's just this great opportunity when it relates to DevOps is it's really driving a lot of transformation. Now, how many folks here have an organization that maybe has a DevOps-related practice or DevOps center of excellence or tool? Great, yeah. So this is something that I think over the next 40 minutes or so we're going to talk about and dig into details. If there's one thing you take away from this, it's have that sense of urgency, work together, collaborate with developers. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to about DevOps, and people from the ops say, where's the ops? It's all dev-driven right now. And they're right. But I think that's when I think about what you're doing in terms of application performance and data collection, that's the opportunity to go and work together and say, hey, we can make your job easier today. We can make it easier today. Let me show you how. So we'll talk a little bit about how to do that. So what are some of the key issues? We're going to talk a lot about thinking through this whole notion of high-velocity IT performance and the role of DevOps. We're going to talk about metrics, how to measure success, how to use them, how to communicate metrics. We're going to talk about the role that application performance analytics plays in DevOps. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about the whole idea that's sometimes often forgotten, which is the role of security, audit, and compliance. So this is something that, again, when you talk about transformation, you think about the traditional requirements of writing an application, deploying and managing an application. There's always security, compliance, and audit. So now, when you use DevOps practices, this is a great way to get ahead of the curve. So we do a lot of research, talk to a lot of customers, large enterprise IT organizations. We feel that DevOps is going to be adopted without a doubt by 80% of the Global 1000 by 2019. And why? Well, think about the last 15 or 20 years. On the operations side, what do we have to drive process standardization, to drive common terminology? It was ITIL. What do we have on the development side? Waterfall, and now Agile. Why? Because we're all under pressure, right? Speed, quality. How many of your managers are asking for you to deliver a competitive advantage? Right? To me, it's a really simple conversation. You say, which one do you want? Do you want speed? Do you want quality? Do you want both? And these are really, really, to me, from a business standpoint, really hard to duplicate. Right? I'll give you an example. Amazon Web Services. Speed. How fast can they get out functional updates to their services? How fast do they refresh their infrastructure? The frequency of the deployments of their services is phenomenal, right? But it's based on how they're organized, the cultural traits they have at the organization, and how they think about execution. That's pretty different than a lot of us, right? But the point is that they've helped their business through speed. And a lot of that comes from writing the code, deploying the code, getting the customer input, and making sure that the business executives understand all that goes behind that. So there's a lot there, and that requires change. And so if you haven't read this book by John Kotter, Leading Change, I strongly suggest go get it. It's an easy read. I just tried to summarize it here in 8 points, but the premise is really, he doesn't talk about technology, DevOps, APM, he doesn't talk about any of this stuff. What he talks about is how organizations deal with change and change management. One of the first things he says is, well, you have to have a sense of urgency. Think about how long it took you to maybe make the move to a new tool or a new automated process. And what triggered it? Right? Was it a sense of urgency? Was it an executive saying, no, we have to do this? Maybe it was some business event. Create a guiding coalition. Visions can change hearts and minds within technology, but numbers change opinions. So anytime you can walk into a conversation with a developer or your colleague who has a strong opinion, right? We're in technology, we often do. You can say, oh, no, here are the facts. Here are the numbers where we are today. It's hard to argue with that. But when you put that together with a guiding coalition, put the vision and numbers together, it's really a great way to help transform. I think communication. This is bread and butter stuff, but oftentimes in technology, sometimes we have a hard time communicating the value of what we're doing. We talk about the technology metrics. Hey, look at all this great stuff. Look at this dashboard I built. Look at the availability metrics. Look at MTTR, et cetera. But what's that mean to a business manager? How do they think? What's the language of business? It's finance. Revenue, profit, margin, internal rate of return, ROI, right? So these are things that we have an opportunity to drive change in how we communicate and what we communicate. Short-term wins. This is something I think you're probably very familiar with. You've probably had to do it with what you're executing now. A relentlessness. And then in terms of culture, we all have different technology, organizational cultures, business cultures. Really getting a sense of what are the traits that matter. How do you take advantage of them? Some cultures really drive empathy, collaboration, trust. Others are more, not as metric-based. So this is what Kotter talks about in this book, and I think it could really help you as you're thinking through how you're transforming your group and your role in the broader transformation of the organization. Now this is a slide that I think big entertainment company used to drive this culture of courage, they called it. They were going through a transformation. They really thought about, how do we drive this change? And a couple things that really stood out for them. One was positive disruption. They realized that they're going to have some tough conversations. They didn't want to blame people, but they just wanted to move forward. So they deemed it positive disruption. They also realized, hey, lots of opinions here, executives with lots of political inertia and bureaucracy. How do we change that? How do we get through it? Use a lot of metrics. Business, technology, really wrap up the whole conversation with what are the metrics that they wanted to achieve? What are the metrics they were going to use to measure and judge people? Another key thing, expect setbacks. Right? Anytime you're going through a transformation or a big difficult change, there's going to be problems. But keep working through them, be relentless, don't stop. They also decided that they needed a DevOps community. So whether you call it a center of excellence, center of enablement, there's a couple different organizational structures that the companies look at. One is creating a real COE, having a team of people that are change agents that want to collaborate from development, operations, bringing them together to not only create the service, but run the service. Another way that the companies are looking at org structures are just thinking about a horizontal process and plucking people out of the different groups, not changing the reporting structure, but having them apply a DevOps methodology to that particular horizontal process. They also came up with 3 C's, they called it, right? Collaboration, curiosity, and courage. And I think that last one is something you don't hear a lot about, right? Which is having tough conversations, honest conversations, things that challenge the status quo, and really realizing there's going to be a lot of change and recognizing who the people are that are going to be the change agents to drive this forward. So again, sort of talk about DevOps. Ops is the forgotten stepchild in this discussion. But I think more and more we're seeing operational folks say, wait a second here. We've got a lot of information, got a lot of pertinent information on the business, on the customer, on the application, on the availability of a service. How do you push that into the conversation? I think first and foremost, one of the things that's really important, identify what development's doing, right? Continuous integration, continuous delivery, application release automation, change management. These are hot button projects that the majority of large enterprise organizations on the development side are executing today. Another one, moving from manual to automated testing. Right? You have information that's pertinent to just about every one of those projects. You can influence some of the decisions. I would suggest you reach out. Say, hey, who can I talk to? How can we share some ideas? A common theme in DevOps is automation. Right? Development is under pressure to do more. They're pushing more and more pressure onto ops because their ability to deliver services is increasing. Right? GitHub, AWS, cloud-based architectures, Foundry, Pivotal, all these dynamic architectures are now enabling faster development of applications, microservices. And so the infrastructure and operations folks think, whoa, hold up, how do I manage all this? So it's a great way to get on the same page and to use the data you're collecting on the application stack and the infrastructure to help them think through how to use that information, how to manage change better, how to reduce error rates and drive the frequency of deployments up. And a lot of this is from collaboration, right? I know traditionally ops, dev, not a lot of collaboration. We've got to change, right? We're in technology, everything's changing. So it's a great way, I think it's a great career opportunity to not only potentially make a lot more money and get promoted, but it's a great way to drive transformation in your organization. Now there's another book here by Mike Rother, if you haven't read it. This is something a little different. It really talks about the organizational side. And I know some of us might talk about Conway's Law, which historically has stated the way that an organization is structured dictates the product and the product development cycles. Well, this takes a little bit of a different stance, saying, reorganization is not as important as the way that people react and the way that people act. So he wrote a whole book on this based on the Toyota use case. And they really talked about the process in terms of improvement. Now when I think about this broader theme of application performance or IT operations, it's a lot about improvement, right? It's about maintaining, it's about thinking through innovation, driving service availability, tuning the services. And so they came up with this sort of idea here around the process of driving continuous improvement. And it wasn't so much around how people are organized, but how to change the way they think, how to change their behaviors, and the process that they can take. And when I saw sort of the yellow blocks, I thought to myself, gosh, that's where IT Ops has been. This is the process they've been doing. So it's a good book to get your head around in terms of the whole notion of changing people, the way they act and react. Now here's a high-level use case, and again, something different than maybe you've thought about traditionally, and this whole theme of continuous delivery. And one of the things that strikes me is when you think about high-velocity IT, the information you're collecting, you've got a great role in this team. One is, first off, the business case. Traditionally, developers aren't very good at talking business and don't really think about the business side of the equation, right? Whether it's talking about increasing customer experience, maybe it's helping increase renewal rates, maybe it's helping a company expand into international markets. And a lot of this is from application services, right? Business services. So when you think through continuous delivery, one of the things that's really important is, what's your role in helping shape that business case? You've got information that can help them. Drive the business outcome and the business metrics. Another key piece of this is the process. Right? You deal with a lot of sophisticated processes. It's hard work, collecting information, figuring out what to collect, what not to collect. Event management, incident, change, problem, right? All these things are really important to the developer side in this whole theme of continuous delivery. So really thinking through the impact of the process and what you're doing on this. The third piece, tools. You've got lots of tools. You're probably rationalizing your tools. Well, so is development, right? And I think that this is another great opportunity to come together, talk about automation, talk about continuous delivery, and drive a consolidated conversation about how the information can drive a continuous delivery pipeline. Talk about adoption. Think through, one of the things I had a conversation with at lunch, I was talking to a company. I said, oh, how many folks do you have here? And they said, 2. I said, oh, what do you use the product for? Application performance. I said, oh, great, but we're trying to get it expanded. I said, oh, let me guess, into development. Yes. I said, oh, how many people are you talking to? We're talking to 8. I said, why aren't they here? And to me, that's the opportunity. Because when you talk about continuous delivery or integration or even the theme of automation, it's not an either or. Increasingly, companies like Amazon, they're driving this collaborative perspective. They're driving a lot more end-to-end holistic process automation. They're putting in the work in terms of integrating disparate tools and fragmented processes. And so this is something that I think, again, going back to the opportunity on DevOps, this is a great way to get into the conversation and drive adoption. So this is just one idea around high velocity. Now we talk about metrics. This is something that I think it could be a wonderful translation layer. And I think this is something, as you consider what you do in terms of collection of the information, how do you communicate that? Right? If you're talking to your team, who probably knows everything about the application stack, you can have a wonderful technology metric discussion. Now, what if you had that same discussion with a developer team? Would you use the same terms? Would they understand what you're saying? And vice versa, if you're a developer with the IT ops. So this is some of the things, really from a technology standpoint, deployment frequency, looking at lead time for changes, change error rates, failure rates. These are how developers think. So again, your information has an impact on this. And they want it. They need it. They need visibility. They're trying to accomplish really the same end game around speed and quality that you are. Now, the flip side to this is business managers don't know much, right? And I would argue that the past 10 or 15 years in tech, from the CIO down, we've put a lot of time into understanding our businesses. Right? We put a lot of time in understanding, hey, what impact can we have on the business? But the business managers, the CEOs on down, they haven't put that time in. To me, fundamentally, I think a lot of this is a business problem. Is that going to change? I don't know. I think the smart companies get it, right? You think about your business management and how much effort they put into understanding the technology and the impact on their business. Folks like Google, Facebook, they architected their businesses around the technology investment. People, process, and technology. So I think being a translation layer to not just understanding the tech metrics, but what's that mean to the business? How is that driving out revenues? How is it driving out cost avoidance, being able to scale out into new international markets? And so this is a great way to be the translation layer for the business. And then finally, the other piece of this is value, right? And you could use the analogy of buying a car. We all could go and look at the same exact car and have all kinds of different opinions about why we like that car or why we don't like it. It's our perception. And it's the same in business. So thinking through, okay, if you're going to talk about revenue or profits, does that executive really want more productivity? Are they perceiving quality as a sustainable competitive advantage? Maybe it's speed. Maybe they're looking at it in terms of throughput or a compliance issue. So I think that really thinking through how you talk about the metrics, who you're talking about the metrics, and how are they thinking about it, what's the value to them, is becoming increasingly critical. Now, this is actually an example from a large tech firm. Can't say who it is, but this is something that they put together a dashboard for their executives. And they said, well, what matters to you? What are the business, technology, what are the things that you really want to see to judge our success? And so as you can see here, I mean, it's nothing too sophisticated. They said, okay, adoption metrics. We're going through all this transformation, operations, development, PPM, the whole thing, acquisitions. Well, platform adoption. We're going to standardize on certain platforms. What's our adoption rate across IT? Across process automation, right? They have all kinds of defined people, process, and technology standards that they're pushing standardization across. Talk about process, talk about people. So again, the adoption side of it was very important to them. The flip side, the program metrics. So they looked at their investment in terms of number of units of work for speed, cost, and quality. So this, to me, this sort of summarized the thinking around the business and technology discussion, the importance of metrics, collecting the information to be able to measure the metrics, and then communicating these metrics to the right constituent, the right audience within IT and the business. So measuring value with DevOps. A lot of people will say, oh, DevOps, too complex, too hard, why should I do it? And, here's some reasons why. Right? Why reach out to the development? Why reach out to the ops? Why try and collaborate? Well, we talked about speed, right, as a potential sustainable advantage. One of the questions, how fast are you moving today? You think about your current deployment of a most recent product you acquired. How long did it take to deploy? What changed? The change hopefully was better. What other changes is it bringing? What other new discussions is it bringing? So really, in the case of Agile, one of the ways to measure speed is the number of enhancements or stories delivered, right? Another one is cost. Big thing now, I was at a conference a couple weeks ago with about 1,000 executives in Chicago. It was all about cost transparency. I'm sure there's companies in here that are using some type of tool to measure the cost of the services. And it's not just the application, is it? It's the infrastructure costs. It's the people costs, the integration costs, potential partner costs. So cost transparency has really raised the bar in terms of not only how you change the language in conversations with business, because right now, you probably went to your business and said, hey, we just saved you a lot of money. And they say, great, next year save me more. You say, well, wait a second. What happened to the money I just saved you? We took it, and we spent it. And that sucks. What you want to say is, wait a minute here. We're going to save you money, but if you want us to do more, you have to make some decisions. Right? The business has to say, wait a second. We need this, this, and this from you. Oh, okay. Well, here's what it's going to cost. Would you like to cut something or give us more money? So cost transparency is a really, really growing, important senior executive topic, and lots of organizations are getting involved. And again, that word transparency keeps coming up at the conference, right? You can support that. Quality. We talked a lot about quality. Of course, how do you support that? Incidents and downtime, right? Mean time to repair, mean time to failure. Integration with incident problem change management. These are all things that are pertinent to not just you, but development and operations. We talked about adoption around process and platform. And then finally, I think the business value side of this. Now, ultimately, I think a lot of this comes down to customer experience. What is that customer experience? Who's the customer? Right? It's funny, I advise a lot of business and technology folks. I say, who's your customer? So some business folks can't even answer it. It's bad. But, ask yourself, who are you serving? Is it an internal customer? Is it a partner? What's that executive want? What are they looking for? What are you trying to accomplish with the project? And a lot of this starts with, the business outcome and the business discussion really from the start of the project. I was with one very large financial firm a couple months ago, and we were talking about this. And I asked this executive, I said, so what business outcome do you want from this project? He's like, compliance. We just need to be more compliant. We need to automate, we need to bring this stuff together. It's like, okay. So really asking that question can just get you tons of information and really help set the stage for the projects that you're doing, the products that you're supporting, and how you can work together in terms of development operations. Now, I thought this was pretty interesting because I think there's a lot of opportunity here in terms of this common theme of automation. And I remember back in the late 2000s, did a lot of advisory work with two companies, used to be called AppSphere, Blade Logic. Blade was acquired by BMC for $800 million, and AppSphere, which was led by Andreessen, was on the board, and then Ben Horowitz. That was acquired for, I think, 1.4, 1.6 by HP billion. And they all talked about data center automation. It was cool. It was really hard, heavy scripts. Wasn't the easiest thing. They sold a good amount of it. And it was really about server provisioning. It was really about infrastructure automation. And now you look at where we are today, 2015, here we are again. We're talking a lot about automation in the development side. We continue to do a lot of automation on the ops side. And so you're seeing this common theme of people who want to reduce business risks, drive a more secure service, and have a more compliant, auditable service through an automated process. It's a combination of technology integration, bringing together fragmented processes, and really having open conversations about what's possible short-term, long-term. So here's a philosophy. This is something that I've talked to a lot of executives. They said, oh, wow, this is easy for the team to understand. It's easy for us to sort of get around and drive a vision. And think about this as you're thinking about what you do today. First and foremost, get the right information to the right people at the right time. Right? You're going to automate something. They have to have the right information. If there happens to be a manual process in that automated step, somebody has to know, okay, what's going on? Can I just click something and say, okay, it's solved? Or does somebody else need attention to it? Find problems as fast as possible. That's what you do. This is an important step in an automated process. Don't repeat mistakes. We try, but it's a good way to think about automation. Another philosophy, analyze from multiple angles. How many times you walk into a meeting, people, development, operations, app support, everybody's got a different angle. Now your data's wrong. No, my data's right. Okay, that can help drive a better automated process. If you know you're right, let people prove you're wrong. Right? If you're going to automate a process, you say, no, this is what we need to do, and here's why we need to do it. Here's our baseline. Here's the numbers that support it. Prove me wrong. If you know you're right, there's nothing to worry about. Help people help themselves. Again, I think going back to the data collaboration and data sharing. Automate dumb work. Keep it tailored. Focus on the process. And then this other one too, which often doesn't get talked a lot about automation, but it's security. We all have all these services you're supporting. Well, I can guarantee you there's probably security policies that are created well before you've written any line of code, well before you've put any monitoring in place. Whether it's security, compliance, audit, I sort of bucket them all in the same. Because they're pre-requirements, right? We need to do it. You just need to sort of deal with it. And historically, what have we done? After the fact, oh great, here comes an auditor. It's like, oh, I don't want to talk to the guy today. But now, through all this transformation, you got an opportunity to go and invent new things and have new discussions. How do you do that? Here's some points. Again, this is taken from a lot of conversations with security, audit, and compliance folks that deal with IT operations, that deal with development. They're like, oh, this could be easier. Number one, identify a problem. Start with application scanning, document best practices, show what changed, defer to expertise and not authority. So this is a great way to go and have a conversation with security, audit, compliance teams and think about the type of impact you want to have before you get to the point of, oh boy, you got a big headache on your hands after deployment of an application or problem. Access management. Develop privileged access management capabilities in the process, not paper tracking. So as automation, as this whole theme of DevOps, as you think about a unified team of developer operations folks, sysadmins, traditionally there's been lots of sensitivities around who has access to what. And so access management's becoming an increasingly important topic to discuss, hey, how do you deal with this new organizational structure of DevOps and these new requirements? Include policies and iterate. Static, dynamic, there's lots of different policies, right? Around the applications, around the management, around the data, the governance. So think about going to these teams saying, what are the existing policies around the data that you're collecting, around the data and availability, especially if it's a partner? Another key thing, prevention and containment. In the security world, this is becoming, it's almost accepted that there's going to be an attack sometime, that there's going to be a problem from a security standpoint. And now it's about, can we contain it? How do we prevent further expansion of that initial attack? So this is a great way to share information. You talk about separation and segregation of duties, vulnerabilities on broken things, identify, document, and determine the activities. There's always, there's some policy in place. Just spend some time saying, hey, what's already in place? Let me understand if I can have an impact on this as it relates to DevOps, as it relates to the broader application service you're managing. And then finally, communications. Look, security audit and compliance teams, they're a pain to talk to. They don't understand you. You don't understand them. It's a whole different world. It's a different world for me. But there's common outcomes that you want. And the one really easy one is, look, they want a consistent outcome. You want consistent availability. You want a consistent performance. You want to know that this stuff's going to work. And if it doesn't, why? And let's go fix it and move on. That's what they want. They want to know, look, if you're going to automate something, is that outcome going to be the same every time? And if not, can you give me transparency into the process? Sure. Here's our dashboard. What would you like? You want documentation? So they want, you don't have to understand their language per se, but approaching them really breaks down a lot of barriers, and it can really drive a lot of innovation and efficiency at the front end of a DevOps project. Now, if you have a minute, maybe 10-ish, we're doing a survey. We're doing a lot of research around best practices on DevOps. If you want a copy of the research, you can get a copy of it. Just go to the site and click through it. We've got a lot of best practice and things that we share. So if you have an opportunity, love to have your input on this. And you'll get a copy of it. It's all aggregated. It's all confidential. Now, executive summary. Use business and systems metrics. Right? Besides the sense of urgency, obviously metrics, this is a crowd that understands metrics. You have a great opportunity here to transcend the traditional boundaries of development operations. Outcomes, more important than outputs, right? Anytime you start a conversation with what's the business outcome, what's the technical outcome, what are the metrics we're going to judge this on, it's just a great way to make sure that, number one, the executives got their act together, right? Who wants to work for an executive who doesn't have their act together? It's like, give me a break. Ask them, hey, why are we doing this? What are the business and technical outcomes that we want to achieve here? Instrument everything. I was sort of laughing to myself. I saw an earlier presentation that had pretty much the same thing in there. Know what you're instrumenting. Democratize the data. Again, DevOps is really about collaboration, a different cultural perspective between development and operations. But when you can share this data, isn't it funny what transparency can do in a conversation? Oh no, here's the numbers. Here's what goes on. It can really change the conversation. It can really change political inertia. And finally, DevOps practices. Give it a try if you aren't. And if you are, raise your hand and say, hey, what's going on? How can I be a part of this? Make sure that whether you're in operations development, the most important thing is that person has to understand why should they change today? What's in it for them? And that's directly from John Cotter. So I think we have a couple minutes here. But thanks again. I appreciate your attentiveness and listening. Hope you sort of broaden your perspective. Any questions? There's a question right there.
You have a slide about adoption rates.
Yeah.
How are people measuring adoption rates of the platform process? How do you empirically measure that?
Yeah. So there's one of the ways that I think is probably the dominant way is teams come together and say, look, we're going to adopt a new tool, or we're going to try DevOps. We're going to apply it to a certain set of projects. It's a crisp identification and definition of what they're going to measure in terms of a defined platform. Sometimes maybe it's a methodology around automation. Maybe it's continuous integration, whatever the theme is. And they define it as such a platform. Maybe it's a converged fabric. Maybe it's a hardware. It could be a lot of different things. But number one is identification of what are we measuring. And then number two is recognizing what's the impact, who's getting involved from cross-silo, what's the applications, and sort of dissecting that as a defined platform. So that's the key thing here in terms of measuring adoption of a particular architecture. A big one now is moving from legacy modernization, moving off of mainframe to other types of architectures. And so every company defines a platform differently, but it starts with that definition and then recognizing that there's the people involved that maybe traditionally weren't, processes that are impacted, and then of course tool adoption. And sometimes a lot of companies say, well, my platform is a set of tools. Okay, well, build out from there. Just depends on the organization. Other questions? Once, twice?
I have one question.
Oh, yeah.
What are your thoughts on what role the organizational structure and the team that you assembled?
Oh, sure, yeah. So,
In this DevOps?
yeah, there's sort of three organizational strategies that we've seen. But one is right now dominating a lot of conversations for, I think, a lot of reasons. One, which is, the first is a lot of organizations say, okay, this whole thing, a DevOps, they've heard about it. Let's put a center of excellence together. And there's some people that would disagree with me on this, but so companies say, look, we got politics everywhere. We have old silos. We've got new it's organizational chaos. So they say, let's try it. And one of the things that's really important there is, number one, strong technology leader. You got to have somebody who's committed to this, not just for a quarter or two, at least a year. Number two, which is, okay, the right people on the team. So you don't want folks that aren't career-oriented. You don't want to have folks that don't want to drive change. You don't want to have folks that say, hey, the old way of doing this is the right way. You want people who have a fresh attitude about, we can do it better, and we should be doing it better, who are collaborative, team-oriented, who like to be judged on transparent metrics. So when you get that type of personality, set of traits together, then you got the executive, you got the team, then you isolate, okay, what is the project or two that you want to go attack this DevOps perspective on? So you have a COE, and what we're seeing are the benefits of having that dedicated team is driving a lot of transformation, both top down and bottom up. So what happens is it's actually accelerating project success. It is getting other people who traditionally maybe didn't want to deal with it to say, hey, wait a minute. You guys were pretty successful on that particular project. I want to know what's going on here. Maybe I need to change the way I think. So it's a grassroots type of accelerant for transformation. And then the other thing that's happening is being sort of positioned as, hey, this is a career opportunity. You're going to try something new. You're going to have an impact potentially on new tools, new processes, new way of thinking for the company. And you're going to learn something, work with a team that you traditionally didn't work with. So it drives a lot of empathy between development operations folks. It drives a lot more collaboration and teamwork. And it's also driving a lot of transparency, because people then are saying, oh, wait a minute. From the start, here's what we're getting judged on. And we have an executive who can help us through some of the political inertia that we're going to experience. and that there's an acceptance of failure. In other words, as they sort of go through the challenges, these teams aren't sort of, they're sort of protected and expected to move beyond the challenges. One executive put it, he said, it's okay if you fail, but it's not okay to not try. And so that's one org structure, which is a COE. The second one is really looking at those type of people and not necessarily putting them on a team, but saying, oh no, we've got these DevOps projects, I want 50% of your time on it. Yes. And then the third one is less frequent, but it happens, which is the identification of a horizontal process that transcends the silos. And they say, hey, let's see if we can have a collaborative team to attack that process and see how we can do it differently. So 3 different structures are primarily the way that it's being done. Other questions? All right, well, hey, thanks a lot. Appreciate your time. Enjoy the conference.